Hey GC fam, it's so good to be back with you guys. Miss you all. Excited to see you guys this Wednesday. And I'm excited to get back into this book and be studying the book of Colossians together. You know, one of the most interesting things I find when I read the Bible is that the apostles or the disciples of Jesus, throughout the whole entire storyline of the New Testament, it took them a while to finally figure out who Jesus was. I mean, throughout the story of the Gospels, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we see that the disciples at first believed that Jesus was a good rabbi or that he was this hopefully political figure that would come and reinstate the nation of Israel. But towards the end, we see that the disciples finally figure out and they finally come to the realization that Jesus is not just the Messiah or Son of God, this political figure, but he's actually God himself. The disciples come to believe and hold firmly to the idea that Jesus is fully God and fully man, that he is the anointed Messiah promised in the Old Testament that is also God himself. And as Christians, whether you realize it or not, if you claim to believe in Jesus Christ, if you claim to be a Christian, this is the truth that you also hold to, that Jesus is fully God and fully man. And one of the most unique things is that the Colossians and their struggles dealing with the Colossian heresy, as we learned about last week, one of the most interesting things that these other ideas and other forces that were coming into the church and claiming to be Christian but pulling the Colossians away, one of the things they were claiming is that they knew who Jesus was, is that they were altering and polluting and messing up the truth about who Jesus was, being fully God and fully man. So Paul writes this letter, and in our passage that we're going to be reading today, he addresses this problem by first just talking about and reminding the Colossians of who Jesus is. And really that reminder is also for you and I, because like we talked about last week, we also struggle with these problems. Other ideologies, other ideas coming into the church and trying to pull us away from the truth of who Jesus is. And so Paul says this reminder, starts this off by reminding us of who Jesus is in order to teach us a very important fact. He wants to teach us about the preeminence of Christ, or better yet, basically, the superiority of Jesus, the fact that Jesus is the best. And when we read our passage today, Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 23, we're going to see three statements that the Apostle Paul makes about Jesus that proves to us and teaches us about the preeminence of Christ or the superiority of Jesus. And so we're going to just walk through those verses together. We're going to learn who Jesus is. We're going to just remind ourselves about who Jesus is so that we can be reminded of the superiority of Jesus. So let's start with the first part. The first statement that Paul makes about Jesus is that he is the firstborn of all creation. And we read that in verses 15 through 17. So let's read that real quick. Here it starts with this. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. You see, these first couple verses, Paul makes a really big statement, a really crazy statement about Jesus. We see it in the first sentence. It says, Jesus, he is the image of the invisible God and the firstborn of all creation. So let's break up that statement by the two parts, right? First thing that Paul says is that Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Well, what does that mean? Well, basically what it means is that when you look at Jesus, you are seeing God. When we look at Jesus, when we read about Jesus in his word, in the Bible, what we're seeing is the revelation of everything and all of who God is. But then we read again when he says, Jesus is also the firstborn of all creation. Well, what does that mean? Well, I know for you and I, when we hear firstborn, we think about like birth order, right? I have two older sisters, so my older sister, Monica, is the firstborn of our family. Well, this is not the case here. Well, what Paul's actually talking about is the importance or the importance or the superiority of Jesus. What he's basically getting at is that Jesus is wholly other than everyone here that was created by God. Basically, he's saying that Jesus is God himself, that he is above creation, that Jesus is in the category of creator and not creation. Follow my train of thought here. Here's an example. See, in the first book of the Bible, Genesis, we read that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth through his word. He didn't move things around. He didn't grab something and modify it. Through his word, all of creation came out of nothing, right? Well, we go to the New Testament, the book of John. And in the very first chapter, in the first couple verses, he says that the Word was in the beginning with God, and the Word created all things. And then we read that the Word became flesh. That's who Jesus is. Jesus was present at creation. He created the Word because he is the world, because he is God. And also he is the Word incarnate. He is God revealed to us. He is God in the flesh. Now, this revelation of who Jesus is has powerful implications upon you and I, right? I think it has two big implications on our lives. One, first, Jesus is not like any other God or any other being in other religions. He creates creation, but not only that, he's fully other, but yet he comes and dies for his creation. No other God, no other worldview has that happening, where the creator or the being that created the universe would come and put on flesh and die for his creation, a broken and messed up creation. But the second implication that has is that when we talk about Jesus, we have to understand that he is wholly other than who we are. He's not like human beings. Our brains are not capable of fully understanding who Jesus is. So what does Jesus do in his love? Well, in his love, God, Jesus, reveals himself to us, teaches us about himself through the Bible. So when we talk about Jesus, when we talk about Jesus with others, we have to go to the Bible. We're not capable of just defining him upon our ideas or things that we learned about in school. We have to go to the Bible in order to define Jesus correctly and talk about the correct Jesus, because he is so amazing. He is in the creator category. He is above us. We need him to reveal himself to us so that we can talk about him correctly. So what's the second statement that Paul makes about Jesus? Well, we see it in verses 18 through 20. And the second statement he makes is that he is the firstborn of the dead. Look what verses 18 through 20 says. Verse 18 says, "And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, and that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross." You know, when we talk about Jesus and we talk about him living on earth, the best way you could describe what he did while he was on earth is that it was a rescue mission. I mean, the storyline of the Bible confirms this. You know, we read throughout the whole entire Bible that in the beginning, God created this world perfect and amazing. He created this world and created humans to be perfect and to have a relationship with him. But because of the failure of our first parents, Adam and Eve, to meet God's standard, because of their sin, we were eternally separated from God, and this world was powerfully broken. But in God's love, he calls a people named Israel, and he calls them to be his people, and he reveals to them that not only will he make a way for humanity to be right with God, but he will also fix this broken and messed up creation. Later on in the New Testament, we read that the way that God does that is through sending his son, Jesus Christ, him in the flesh, to come and live the life we can never live, die the death we deserve, and to resurrect. See, the resurrection is so important because what the resurrection does is not only does it remind us that now humanity can be made right with God through Jesus, but it also points us to a future. Jesus is the first fruits of the future where there will be a fixed and restored creation, where there'll be no more crying, no more death, no more pain, where we'll be given, for those who believe in Jesus, we'll be given new resurrection bodies that won't feel the brokenness that we feel right now. See, when we talk about Jesus, we're talking about that Jesus. When we're talking about Christianity, we're not talking about a religion that gives good advice or a better way to fix the environment. We're talking about dead, spiritually dead people coming back to life because of Jesus. We're talking about us being made right with God, being able to have a relationship with God, and being pointed to a future where there will be a new world, a creation that's fixed. You know, me and my wife, we love watching the Marvel movies. And we've literally watched all of them multiple times, and now we're on the TV series that are awesome. But you know, I think the reason why I personally like the Marvel movies so much is because I like the idea of a hero. A hero who sees people who are hurting and sacrifices everything to save those people. And I think that's a longing in all humans. We long for that hero to come and save us. Well, when we talk about Jesus, we're talking about the ultimate hero that not only makes us right with God, but also points us to a future where this brokenness will be saved, where this brokenness will be fixed. I hope that encourages you, that the Jesus that you put your faith in, the Jesus that we talk about, is the ultimate hero that we're all longing for. So let's finish this all out. The last statement that Paul makes about Jesus is that Jesus is so great that he has an implication upon you and I, that he changes our lives forever. So let's read verses 21 through 23 real quick. Verses 21. And you who were once alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he, Jesus, has now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him. If indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister. You know, Jesus is so great that one of the biggest implications that he has on our lives is that he must be preeminent, or basically, he must be put first in our lives. If you take anything away from this today, it's that Jesus deserves to be the first thing in your life. He deserves all your devotion, all of your attention. But the problem with us as humans is that, even as Christians, is that we can know that in our heads, but it doesn't connect to our hearts. We could struggle with putting Jesus first in our lives. Pastor David Ritchie says it's because our hearts are captivated by other visions of glory, whether it's our jobs, our relationships, our marriages, our families. Those things can be put first before Jesus. So what do? Well, in the passage we see a simple command or a simple suggestion here. Well, it's a command really. It says to continue in the faith, to be steadfast in the gospel. Basically, it is to rehearse the gospel. It's to live lives where we rehearse the gospel, preach the gospel to ourselves, the message of Christ's life, death, and resurrection. It's to get together in groups and talk about and remember the gospel. It's to pray about the gospel. You see, the gospel is not just the thing that makes you a Christian, it's the thing that keeps you going as a Christian. See, the point of Christianity is not to be perfect, but it's to be completely dependent upon God and upon Jesus because we're not perfect. See, the gospel is going to shape you. It's going to help you. It's the narrative that helps you understand life. It's the narrative that helps you understand your pain. It's the narrative that gives you hope for your pain. It's the narrative that helps you see that the brokenness of creation will one day be fixed. So I hope as we talk about who Jesus is, and as we study about this in the book of Colossians, that this would cause you to remember that the gospel is the thing that you have to cling on to in your life. I hope and pray that as we study this tonight or on Wednesday, that you will be able to walk away just saying, man, Jesus is so great. And as you struggle and as you have hard times, as your week is hard, as your year is hard, that you'll be able to rehearse the gospel in your mind and remember how great Jesus is. I look forward to talking about this more with you guys on Wednesday. Love you guys.